Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us, and I hope all of you are having a lovely day. And wow, it is Friday, the last day before, well, I think a lot of people take an extended weekend to enjoy the holidays. And, just want to get right out ahead of this. And, of course, we've been mentioning it all week. But if you haven't been paying attention, well, Computer America will be taking off all next week. So Monday through Friday, no new shows. We will have Best of Computer America's running. Do not worry about that. And, in the meantime, we'll be resting up and, of course, scheduling out next month because, it works out that way where we get that nice long extended break, and then that turns into the busiest time of year, which is early January. It's, hectic out there, and we'll talk about that and more here on the show coming up. But just know, next week, no new shows, and we will be back at it January 2nd, bright and early. So with that being said, a few things before we get to our guest, including computeramerica.com, that will have all the show notes, all the links to everything that we talk about just in one convenient place. Check that out if you are busy and you can't follow along. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest, which we will be having a winner later on today, brought to you by Logitech, and the live video stream where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. So, again, check all of that out at Computer America, and I just want to bring on our guest instead of keeping him waiting oh so patiently. So, joining us, he is a longtime Computer America correspondent. He's been helping us, with so many endeavors over the past couple of years. We really thank him for it, and happy to have him on because, while we don't always agree, he is a lot of fun to argue with. So, welcome once again, Nathan Evans, Popzara magazine. Nathan, how you doing?
Hey Ben, what's going on? So you're talking about reruns next week?
Reruns next week of the show, absolutely.
Reruns. That's we'll get into it later, but I have a funny story about reruns that ties quite nicely into tech and everything that I think the listeners will like. And by the way, why do you always have to make it say like we don't always agree? Like that's true about anybody.
Yeah,
No two people agree.
You think that, but I mean a lot of publications that I watch on a daily basis, be it television or other radio, there's not really a lot of dissenting opinions, and I gotta say,
that's by design.
but that's why I like to point it out where I'll be honest, it's you are one of our most pronounced dissenting opinion to a lot of what we talk about here on the show. We don't try to hide the other side
because I don't care about my career other than this. That's the difference.
There you go. But I do like to say that we do get a lot of response on the show from just you and your standpoint. So I'm like, hey, might as well make it a highlight. So hey,
I appreciate
you're
that.
on.
But I tell you what though, when you go into a room and everybody agrees, that's a cult. So cults can be fun though. By the way, the dating pool is much better in cults. So.
We do not advocate dating in cults, but we will say that you are here. We're happy to have you here, and you come on every month. And just real quick for anyone out there who may not know about Popzara and your pedigree, how does Popzara fit into the tech landscape?
I was gonna say slick like butter. No, you know Popzara. I mean, we know Popzara. You like Popzara. I like Popzara. We all love Popzara. But no, we cover tech. I got a dedicated guy who's been on your program many times. Will be soon again, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Our two brands have united to team up for shows like CES and E3 before, which is always fun. I think when you run a website with a mascot that looks like a ripoff of Yoshi, then you only have one way to go, and that is you got to go your own way, as Fleetwood Mac said. So the problem is that basically it comes down to this, Ben. You know this. I've said this before. It bears repeating. You have to separate politics, personal opinion from facts, but you have to do it in a way that's entertaining that won't divide people in a way that I believe other outlets have.
Hmm.
Doesn't make us better. It certainly doesn't make us more popular. But I will tell you this: it's more fun to talk about when you're more inclusive. When you don't automatically come to the table with an agenda like, well, I hate this or I love this or I love this. You examine things because in reality, ironically, the one thing that brings everybody together more is hating things. So, yeah,
Yeah,
you'll never find, like, for example, like we'll talk about, I know we're going to talk about Star Wars later, but hating things makes people come together in a way that you couldn't get if you only required people to love things. It's really hard to get two people to agree on any two things, but it's really easy to get people to agree on what they don't like. So celebrate the hate this Christmas season.
yeah, celebrate the hate, and of course spread peace on
Sorry.
earth as best you can. But no, you're absolutely right, and not to beleaguer the point, but I will say that it's something I've noticed about a lot of people who do content creation, that people are very quick to say no. They're very quick to say what you're doing is wrong, what you're doing is bad. I've seen better. You could do this better XYZ ways, and helpful, productive criticism aside, is very, very easy to put someone down, and it people get together, and like if you're a fan of Xbox, I've noticed that it's not about championing your console; it's about putting down the other consoles, things like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
It
Exactly.
happens too often. I completely agree.
Here's my final point. It's really fun to knock on things like you said, Xbox or Apple or Google or Elon Musk. It's really easy to knock on him. But but the fact of the matter is if you focus on the person, if you treat products like people, then there's a nasty streak that sort of infects you like a virus. Like you have to do things with tongue in cheek, and you have to do things with a little bit of levity, especially right now. Like the way the country is, the way things are in Europe. Like, don't add to it. You know, decrease from it. Have a little more fun with it. At the end of the day, we're talking about mice and keyboards and laptops and computers and cloud storage and servers and everything. Like, if that really ticks you off, then you got other problems. So
But let us talk about some things that are ticking us off, because you actually have a number of topics here, and there's one that we haven't truly addressed on the show yet. Just happened, and unfortunately our
I
calendar has
know
been
I
booked.
know what you're gonna say. I know what
It's
you're gonna
gonna
say.
be the battery thing, absolutely. I
Oh
assume.
no, I
Oh,
guess I didn't know what you're gonna. I thought you were gonna talk about Schmidt retiring from Google or
You
Alphabet.
know, we have not talked about that because that just happened like yesterday afternoon. So we
Yeah.
haven't had airtime to talk about that. But hey, we can talk about that as well. But I did want to start off with this one about Apple, and I did address this in an echo chamber. By echo chamber, I mean by myself. And I want to hear your reasoning, but I never accused Apple of being racist, and I have my own reasonings. But let's talk about the iPhone 10 and the facial recognition, and how,
Sure.
unfortunately, a nice lady from China was issued a refund after two phones in a row. So it was not a single defective piece of hardware, but two phones in a row unlocked for her coworker. Like not even like her
Sure.
identical twin, her coworker. So yeah,
Okay, well, there's a lot to, I guess, as you'd say, unpack here. And by the way, when you said Apple Store, I was going to say which one? There's so many to choose from.
there are more than
I'll
one.
just
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say there's Battery Gate, but I think we can get into that later. But okay, let's be honest. Uh, I sent you a bunch of stories that had to do with facial recognition because this is the new hotness, as Corey would say, that everybody wants to get into facial recognition. And so usually, I think we've talked about this before, when Apple implements a technology the way they have with the iPhone X, that's usually a sign. Okay, boys, it's good to go. Let's put this on everything.
Right.
And you can see this on kiosks, on computers, and everything. And there's a lot of fun stories we can get into. But the Apple being racist thing was interesting because it reminds me of this story, I think from a few years back about HP, where a black journalist or a black fan was talking about how certain webcams couldn't recognize black skin, and there's been some evidence to support that um, certain, let's just say, tonal differences in pigmentation
Mm-hmm.
require different algorithms to properly pick up. This is true. This is true with anybody. I did not expect this from China because what it does, if you think about this, for example, most iPhones are assembled in China, right?
Right.
They're assembled in Foxconn and everything. And China is the world's largest market for everything. So when you think about this, the first thing I thought about, I'm going to be honest with you, is I thought, okay, well, maybe the iPhone X can't pick up black skin again. I was really shocked to hear it was a Chinese person because you know the old racist epithet that all Chinese people look alike, right?
Right.
That's a horrible slur. So to have an iPhone sort of sort of let's just say have a deficit in that area is very embarrassing to Apple. But I think
So
more importantly though,
yeah.
it's something that can probably be solved. I don't know if you knew this or not, but censorship in China, when we're not talking the Maoist censorship, right? We're talking when it comes to personality. You know how they do this in China? They don't pixelate faces the way we do in the West. They blot out the eyes. Have you seen this?
No, I have not.
Yeah, they put a little black bar over your eyes. Go look up. It's very fascinating. I suppose it has to do with characteristics, or it may have a cultural impact. Have yet to see a difference. But yeah, so when I read about this, I was really interested to see why this was.
So, and you know, and I apologize for maybe pushing this a little quicker, but you know, I do want to get through some of these stories. But
Yeah.
about this one, I want your take on why do you think this is happening? Maybe because I have my own theory about why it's happening, and do you really think that this, you know, paints Apple in a bad light?
I don't think it paints necessarily Apple in a bad light. I think again, if as I mentioned, there's a bunch of stories about facial recognition failures this week. I think it's the technology as a whole. Don't forget that the technology used in the iPhone X is essentially a miniaturized version of going back to Xbox, a miniaturized version of the Kinect. It's made by the same parent company. I think it's from Israel. So Apple paid a lot of money for this, and they've withstand a lot of criticism about the notch. They have not suffered for it because the iPhone X is sold like gangbusters. So the idea that facial recognition is ready for prime time, we kind of saw this happen a little bit with the fingerprint scanner. The idea that you could necessarily translate a alphanumeric entry code like 1 2 3 4 ABC
Right.
into something biorhythmic or I forget the exact term for it, the or biometric like with
Yeah.
the fingerprint scanner.
Biometric. Right.
Richard Dawkins used to talk about this when he talks about evolution. He talks about what is it called? Dry and wetware. And humans are wetware. The idea that our facial characteristics are so distinctive as a line of code is ridiculous. You've heard the expression that no two fingerprints are alike. Well, no two fingerprints are alike that we know of.
Well,
We're not snowflakes.
and I have that. I mean, I think like fingerprints match up like one out of
Yeah.
every 15,000 people. Like it, it's a pretty good indicator, but it's not, foolproof.
No, exactly. And I think there was a story that came out about a month ago about how this one firm had developed this artificial head made out of wax and plastic that could somehow fool the iPhone X camera.
Right.
So this is going to happen. I mean, this is going to happen when you're introducing an entirely new characteristic of security, then this is going to happen. And thankfully, this is happening now before this becomes so pronounced. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to totally be honest with you. This is not an Apple fanboy talking. I'm really glad this is happening with Apple and not happening with Microsoft. Microsoft has facial. I think Microsoft was on board with this well before Apple was. Windows 10
Microsoft,
had.
well, Microsoft worked closely with Intel with their RealSense web cameras and their laptops to essentially you like smile
Yeah.
and it just like automatically sensed you and unlocked it. You're right.
Yeah, and again, they're having their own set of problems. But with the iPhone is the single most piece of personal information. I mean, we've seen lawsuits where the government has tried to compel Apple to unlock iPhones using, fingerprint scanners, using passcodes over terrorism. So this is going to be very interesting to watch. I don't really have anything else add to say to
I
this.
the and just quick, I mean, the only reason that I, when I covered this and I really didn't feel any animosity towards Apple was that I assumed that this was developed. Well, you said in Israel, which is where the parent company is. That makes more sense. I thought it may have been in Ireland because Ireland, they do have Apple headquarters there, and I thought that's
Yeah.
maybe where they did their research and development. Well,
Well, it's if the story was like it couldn't recognize gingers, then yeah,
well,
maybe
well,
it was Irish.
Well, that's
But
kind of the thing where, these things are developed in single locations. There's no point in having offices in, 15 different countries around the world to make sure you get a good demographic. And so that's why I'm thinking that this happened, is that maybe the indicators for, someone who is Israeli or what have you, maybe those indicators, maybe just left of the eye and, cheekbones and things like that, maybe those aren't good indicators for someone of, who happens to be Chinese.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
those 48 data points that they collect just aren't good enough for,
Well,
for this ethnicity.
again, I go back to the censorship in China where it comes again, not the Maoist, not the Maoist type, but the just the media
Right.
type. The fact is, and we don't like to talk about this because we get uncomfortable, but China is a largely mono-ethnic culture. I think they're 90% Han Chinese, and they have I mean, yeah, there's huge ethnic diversity over there, but generally speaking, a lot of these huge Asian cultures like China and specifically Japan, when you have that type of monoethnicism and you don't have a lot of genetic diversity, you're going to have overlapping parallels. I mean, this is just not something we have in the United States. This is not something you have in Europe for the most part. You just have a influx of different racial characteristics, ethnicities, genders, all this stuff. It just creates this wonderful mix, right? A lot of diversity. Not so much in China, although China does have its diversity. In fact, China's minority population, which includes descendants from Mongols, from Islamists, even from Africa. There's cities in China that are all African, right?
Right.
But you're talking about a culture of 1.5 billion people. So
Yeah.
it's the math is staggering. Again, as China emerges as a world leader in this sort of thing, and as a company like Apple must play with these are problems that are going to happen.
Yep.
The same way with black skin and webcams. These are problems that need to be solved.
And
You know,
back to the article that you mentioned, where they did have Apple's vice president of public policy for the Americas. She did say that we worked with participants from around the world to include a representative group of people accounting for every gender, age, race, ethnicity, what have you. I just don't think that you can be
yeah,
that cumulative. This stuff is developed in a lab, and
yeah,
your data
exactly.
is just not going to be good enough. So
This
that's
is
where
uh this
yeah,
is
yeah.
interesting, Ben. I think this is going to be a story worth following. I think in the long term, over the long term.
I'm actually kind of the opposite, where I think that this is a story that needs to be fixed, and that happens through diversity and all that kind
No,
of crap.
that's
But
what I meant. That's what I meant.
right,
It'll be interesting to see how it rolls out because the idea of diversity in the United States and Europe is very different
right,
than the idea of diversity in China. And that's what happens when you have 1 billion people that share the same genetic characteristics. You're going to have overlap, and
right.
it's going to be a problem worth solving.
Yep.
So
And we'll see how they do it, because you're absolutely right. Where you said that this was a hot topic of conversation. Where just about a week ago we did a story about how they're using facial recognition on chickens, and they're hoping within 3 years they're going to get about I think it was like 2.5 million chickens in the system. Or no, I'm sorry, 25 million chickens in the system using facial recognition. I mean, it's only going to become more and more of a topic, because facial recognition, we're going to talk about the one with the burger joint, but
yes,
it's only going to increase in our daily lives. But before we do that, let's move on to Windows, because you alluded to it a few times. What's this about Windows? And something that they always promise us, when we talk about facial recognition, they always promise us it's
yeah.
not going to be defeated by picture. And
Which means it totally will be defeated by a pitcher. Like you might as well put the bat signal out, right? And say, "Hey, come and defeat my encryption." Microsoft has a much worse problem than Apple, simply because with Apple you're dealing with one camera, you're dealing with one piece of tech, relatively speaking. You're dealing with one piece of technology that's been defined. With Windows, you're dealing with billions, if not unlimited combinations of things. You're dealing with webcams from every company, different processors, different everything, and let's be honest, a much larger sample group. And
hmm
so the people out there, the bad guys that want to crack this, and even the ethical hackers, they outnumber the iOS people by a factor of, well, 10. Let's just say that. And so when you have these minds working on this, it reminds me again, going back to the Connect, when the Connect came out and you had tinkerers and hackers use the technology to map things that was not intended to, like bone structure. And using smart algorithms, you could detect body rhythms and you could detect movement. It was used for all sorts of interesting things that weren't related to gaming, which, by the way, was much more useful in that specter. Same with the Windows 10 facial recognition. So people have been able to produce pictures like flat images and hold it up to the camera and log into your computer. And it it I wonder if it has to do more because the stories we've read aren't exactly that specific.
Right.
I wonder if it has to do more with just shoddy technology and shoddy programming, which it almost always does. But I
Yeah.
it just comes down to this: it's not ready for prime time yet.
And
It won't be, but it's not right now.
and some of this, it has happened with shoddy programming because I remember when this first came out with the RealSense camera, that it happened because if you printed out a picture and tried to hold it up, it would identify that it was a piece of paper and it wouldn't open. But then someone said, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna go down to Kinko's because I think Kinko's was still a thing. I'm gonna go down to Kinko's and have this thing laminated." And just the simple act of laminating your photo gave it access to, because it couldn't, maybe it was too shiny to be just a printed picture. And, and it looks like here they printed out in a special color this time. Let's see, near infrared photo with an image resolution of 340 by 340. So this time they printed it in near infrared. So, it seems like, just printing out a piece of paper and holding it up to the camera, they test that like crazy. But laminating it, infrared color pigments, or maybe the next thing, they don't test all of them. So
Of course
yeah,
not.
shoddy
Yeah, it's
programming.
well, it's good. Again, it's good that this is happening, but I also stress to say when I say it's not ready for prime time, if don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, we've all watched those sci-fi movies where people cut off people's fingers and thumbs and eyeballs
Right.
to bypass security. So Lord help us, we don't get to that point. But it's interesting when you think about AI was the big to do this year in tech. Everyone's talking about AI, and what we don't ever talk about is that the way a computer functions with AI is very different than the way our brain functions with AI. A computer camera isn't restricted to the way to seeing the world the way the human eye is. It's completely different. And I think sometimes even those of us who talk about tech a lot, we forget that a camera is superior to the human eye and that can see temperatures. It can see, like you said, infrared. I mean, it's essentially the predator, right? So it needs to
Yeah.
start thinking like the predator. And so I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, Ben, if the solution for this is some sort of chip implant into your body
Hmm.
as a failsafe. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way it's going. You actually do
The
see some
Yeah.
companies working with IFR. What is it called?
Uh. Yeah.
Oh, what is it called? I forget what the
There's
technology is called.
NFC. There's NFC, and then there's like IFRD. Um. Yeah.
Yeah, basically some version of NFC, right? I wouldn't be surprised if that's where we're going with this. And to be honest with you, I think people would overwhelmingly choose that option.
And I love to plug some of our other shows because we have very interesting guests.
Plug
But
away,
yeah,
plug away.
but this Monday, it was December 18th. We had New Data Security. We had a gentleman on from obviously New Data, and they were talking about how they're working with banks to identify people. And again, I encourage everyone to go listen to it. But they work with banks, and essentially, they over a couple of weeks they build up a profile on an individual, and they know that it's like, oh, this person uses tab to shift between fields in the form that they fill out, or this person takes generally 3.5 seconds to enter the password and then click the next button. Like, they
Hmm.
take little behaviorisms that you
Yeah.
really don't perceive, and then that's how they identify you. Where currently they aren't using it to identify people, but they're using it to point out that, hey, maybe this isn't the right person. Maybe the fact that they spent zero point 0.2 seconds to enter their username, maybe that's a robot. And I think that is the future of
Did you, did you
passwords, is that they're going
did
to subtly collect data and identify you based on things that you don't even perceive. Go ahead.
did you see the last Mission Impossible movie?
I did not.
The one the one with Tom Cruise had, every movie has the one spectacular stunt they do.
Yeah.
The one where he's hanging on the airplane. I think it Rogue Nation? I think it was
Uh,
Rogue Nation.
okay.
And what he had to do is he had to infiltrate It's a good movie, by the way, very good. He had to infiltrate the security system by diving underwater for 10 minutes, whatever, so they could retrieve this biorhythmic sample of one of the scientists, because when the scientist would walk through the doorway, a infrared scanner would look at the way he walks, look at his gait, look at his limp, look at the way he breathed. It would track all this, and they needed to replace it with a profile for Simon Pegg, because it's Simon Pegg. So it was interesting. Like, the technology was very interesting the way they did that, as opposed to something like Total Recall, which came out 27 years ago, where Arnold just blew everyone away when he was scanned. So we've come a long way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that is the technology I think they're going to be working on. The point of facial recognition that everyone needs to keep in mind is that the point of all of these is that it's supposed to be seamless and more secure, and really for the end user less troublesome. And if it ever gets to the point where one of those pieces does not fit, where it's more troublesome or it's not secure, they will take it away and they will do something else. So
Well,
they're working
what
on it.
I'll tell you what, though, I don't want to be the guy with the tinfoil hat, but let me be the guy with the tinfoil hat. If I was, Alex Jones conspiracist, the fact is that you're starting to see, lesser versions of this employed at stadiums, at, at political rallies, and all this sort of thing.
Oh,
And
street cameras. Yeah.
yeah, and the idea is, oh, we're going to identify terrorists, but I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think there's any evidence that they can even do that. The idea is that they can match your facial structure with a license plate, a driver's license or an online profile. It just seems to me there's a lot of potential here for theft. There's a lot of potential here for identity theft on a level we've never seen before. And I think if we can segue into the chicken or the burger store we were going to talk about,
Burger, right? Yep.
you have this technology that's been so appropriated that you now have some low-level burger store that I've frankly never heard about before I took this story, Kelly Burger, that has a
Cali Burger,
kiosk
yeah.
that reads your face, that stores that data. With all due respect, if I was going to make a list of places that I'm comfortable with giving my biorhythmic data, a local chain in California called Cali Burger would not be high on the list. Now, El Pollo Loco, sure, because they have, you can get fries with a burrito, but not Cali Burger, and certainly, certainly not any of that. But again, I'm the minority here. I think Facebook and Twitter and all this have convinced me, and I think it's convinced you too,
Well,
that
yeah.
people don't value privacy and security the way they say they do.
Well, there's a Supreme Court case that was just recently decided upon, and or at least argued on the Supreme Court level. And the way that they ruled on it, it was the guy who was accused of robbing banks, and the way that they were able to catch him was that he was at the scene of the crime, never caught on camera, but his cell phone signal was tracked at every one of
Yeah,
his locations, and blah blah blah. Essentially, made it to the Supreme
call that
Court.
triangulation, right?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
but he never gave his permission, and he was tracked surreptitiously through existing technology. The way that they ruled on that left a door open that if the Supreme Court wanted to, there's going to be a massive revamp on what data tech companies can keep on you, because right now it's open season. Anything that
Yeah.
you put in, anything that you are, anything that you do, completely fair game. And that's simply because there was not a policy set in place beforehand. We may see, if not 2018, in the next couple of years, there's going to be a legal battle to be had here about what data, who can collect it, and how much of it they can put
Yes.
together.
Well, hell, that was the plot of Batman: The Dark Knight. You remember when?
And that's the thing, is that movies catch it 10 years before the Supreme Court does. Absolutely.
Yeah, it made Alfred so mad he stormed away. But no, you're exactly right. In fact, there has been sort of precedents before regarding email versus postage mail. Like, the mail you get in your mailbox is federally protected. Nobody
Right.
can touch it. Nobody. Um, Now they say email does not qualify, but yet it does. We have so many devices in our house, all of which ping the internet now. I mean, don't even get me started on the Echo or the Google products. I mean, that's
You
a
you
nightmare
don't
waiting to
like
happen.
you don't like giving Amazon access to your front door. I see that. I see that. Hey, Nathan, the music means we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we're gonna wrap up the story about the burger thing and the future of loyalty rewards. And when we come back, we have much more to talk about, including Apple intentionally slowing older phones down, and a lot more, and including Walmart. So everyone, we'll be right back. More Computer America after this.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. We are talking with Nathan Evans, Popzara magazine. You can check him out, popzara.com, and of course, a link in the show notes. And Nathan, again, coming back from the other side of the break, we were just discussing about a Cali burger, a burger
Cali
joint
burger.
out in California, where they were essentially, and folks, this is not, well, at least so far, you walk up to a kiosk, you take a selfie essentially with the kiosk that's there, and you get like a loyalty rewards program. It's not simply like, oh, the security cameras are identifying you as you walk into the door. Even though, hey, that's obviously a foreseeable future. So you brought up the story, and yeah, and this obviously, freaked you out a little, as I think it will most people.
I don't know about freak out. Like freak out is like finding like my mom in the shower, but in a much more palatable freak out. I'm not a conspiratist and I'm not a paranoid person. I understand the tidal wave has started. It's happening. So it's how you best adjust. Like you can either get washed away with a tsunami or you can get some good surfing in, right? So like I just sent you another story
I
in
got
between
it.
the
I
break
got
that I
it.
just saw.
Yeah.
Even more facial recognition. There's something going on here. But I was going to say, if you're going to be in California, you're going to eat a burger. You don't go to Cali Burger. You go to In-N-Out Burger.
You go to
That's the
In-N-Out.
best. That's the
Absolutely.
best burger in California.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I used to live there, so it's kind of a thing. We're kind of
I
snobbish.
have yet to meet someone who's like, oh, In-N-Out, I hate that place. Like, no one has ever said that. In-N-Out is
Yeah.
just, for the price to the burger that you get, it's awesome.
In-N-Out is pretty. Have you ever had it?
I have. I went out to California 4 or 5 years ago, and oh my God, I ate there like
Yeah.
3 times.
It's so interesting. It hasn't branched out yet. So it's
That's
kind of
probably
like
about
Jack
time.
in the Box, except for it's not terrible.
Yeah,
So
and not to be like, not to talk about burgers too much, but it's, I think
we
they
could
said
talk
that,
about burgers all day.
I know, but I think they said that they don't want to get too far away from their supply chain. So like you can't go like to the East Coast because then you have to get new supply chains. Whatever. Anyways, I did get this article, and when you say that something is going on, I mean, this is reawakening fears of way back in when Xbox One first launched, with the idea of Project Prism, Edward Snowden, all this stuff that happened a couple years ago, where you had the NSA essentially collect mass surveillance on the U.S. population, and that never really stopped. That's still going
No.
on, and
It only goes when it comes to government stuff, and I don't want to get into too much the thick of it. It usually goes one way. It never usually reverses flow. It's like the streams in the Herculean, myth.
so,
You know,
but I do want to say that you think it may be paranoid, but I think and honestly, just coming from a tech person, any idea of paranoia you have about technology and either our government, foreign government, be it China, U.S., Russia, or even large tech companies, your paranoia is probably not even the full extent of what they're really doing.
well,
So
what's really weird for me to admit to you though, is that as paranoid as I think people are, the paranoia fears usually are not borne out. Like, is the government collecting data on you? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're collecting more data on you than you could ever imagine. But what are they going to do with it? And the answer is we don't know. Like, I can't imagine the government, even a government under Trump, that is going out of its way to like set people up. Like, oh, we're gonna do this. People are usually like criminals are usually dumb enough to screw themselves up, right?
Okay,
They don't.
let's
The
yeah.
government doesn't need to sweeten the deal. But
And I totally enjoyed going down this avenue. So I'll bring your attention to one more. And you're obviously a fan of Chinese Japanese culture, things like that. Well, there was a particular country within China. I'm completely forgetting it, but
a country
essentially,
within China. Wow,
yeah.
they're that big.
Well, it was a province. I'm sorry, a province of China
Just kidding.
that's where essentially everyone there were discriminated against. They don't see themselves as full Chinese, but China
Uh-huh.
obviously claims ownership over their territory. Anyways, before they could,
You could be talking about Taiwan.
I,
you know.
I not
So
not not Taiwan, but it was another one. There's like 340,000 citizens in this province, and China is forcibly taking DNA samples of everyone over 13 and pictures, facial recognition, things like that, fingerprints. Essentially, they are collecting all identifying metrics of everyone between 13 and 65 within this province. And they say that China, just wants them to track them. But why are they going to track them? And people have thrown out a lot of theories. You say that, what are they going to do with this information? People are already claiming that China is using, identifying information to
um,
discriminate against
not
people of a certain
not
province.
that's not unprecedented though. In fact, we initiated that program in the United States with Native Americans. People don't know this or not, but Native American ancestry is probably the most tracked ancestry in the world, aside from probably Ashkenazi Jews, right? And the reason we have these databases is because of two things. Because of the atrocious way that the American government handled Native American resettlements in the 1800s and the 1900s, and of course the Holocaust. And what happened is, I don't know if you knew this or not, but you have horrible things like relocation camps back in the 19th century, where basically pseudo genocide, and families became disbanded. They've separated, murdered, killed, died of anything you can imagine, smallpox, blankets, whatever. So Native American tribes dealt. One of the concessions they made with the United States government is that they'd be tracked as a way of compensation. And so to this day, Native Americans are so good at tracking ancestry. And the most prolific thing that's come out of that is compensation for
Yeah,
displacement, but also compensation for royalties. It's very profitable to be part of Native American tribes now.
I have
If you
heard
can
that.
prove, huh, what's that?
I have heard that if you can prove that you have
Hmm.
ancestry leading back to like 164th, and you have someone of Native, the chief of a local tribe, saying that yes, you are a member of the tribe, then you
Yes.
get that paycheck every month.
And I go back to the Holocaust because again the genocide of the I guess you'd call it the Jewish diaspora, right, following the Holocaust, specifically with Israel. What would happen is you'd have these huge data banks of genetics, fingerprints, of samples. The idea was to help families reconcile and get back together, but it's since been used away to keep track of Jewish ancestry. And some people are scared of this. Some people are scared of this because what would happen if it got into the hands of anti-Semitics or eugenicists or whatever?
Yeah.
Um, Go on TV, look at TV every day. You see Ancestry.com where people can, request a swab and they can track their ancestry. Do you know why they can do that? Because of databases like this. The databases plot data points, and you could say, "Well, look at this. I'm related to this and this. I'm part this
And
and this."
we had a company on the show that had did this for dogs, and they also claimed that they were able to do it for cats. But essentially,
Cats wouldn't stand for that.
but that's the thing where like the dogs, they could you send in a sample of your dog's DNA, and then they could tell it exactly what the breakdown of the breeds were. If it was a mutt, they got you covered. Well, when it came to cats, just no one really, you didn't breed cats to do a job. You just needed a cat to catch the rat. It wasn't
Yeah.
really a thing. So they said that they could do it, but really the cat genome wasn't really as
Hey,
sequenced.
I stand by my point. There's a lot of money in dog breeding, you know, And
Exactly.
again, dog breeding is so well tracked throughout the millennia. It's like you said, for whatever reason, dog breeding is so well tracked and so well established because of selective breeding, right? I mean, people want to know lineages. They want to know this. So yeah, so we're seeing profit from this already, and people have no problem. But if I can do a flip side of it, again, let me put on my Alex Jones hat. The fact is that the government has instituted what I think are violating practices, where people who maybe plead guilty to a parking ticket now have to give fingerprints. Why? Why is that? Why did we demote fingerprinting from felonies and misdemeanors to traffic tickets? Why does the government need this? Or in some cases, most egregiously, officers who pull you over for drunk driving can take blood samples. There was a case just this year where a nurse was arrested because she
Yeah, that
refused to
made the
take
news.
blood. So these are things, and that you see such resistance to this is encouraging on one hand, but I don't know if the resistance is sort of like Rogue One in Star Wars, where everyone, you're going to lose.
Well,
Resistance is futile.
and again, to wrap this up, that's why I really do believe that if not 2018, then the next couple of years there will be a court battle to decide what is legal to keep on a person. Because right now,
Yeah,
hopefully it's not what we currently have, because it's just way, way,
I
way, way too much.
to, I keep hinting where this is all going to go, but to quote a certain Jedi master, this is not going to go like you think. So I
There you go.
think all roads lead to uh, data collection.
There you go.
I,
So
I, I just don't I just don't think there's any way around it at this point.
right. So, but we should move on to some of the other topics, because one, again, I really didn't get to on the show because, again, just full calendar. But Apple and older iPhones are intentionally
I am
being
mad about
slowed.
this.
Oh,
I am
really?
mad.
I would
Yeah.
never guess. So please go ahead.
No, I'm mad because it's one thing to be suspicious and to be paranoid. It's another thing to have your paranoia confirmed. When I upgraded to iOS 11, it was nice. It was wonderful. I mean, there were glitches, but I have noticed since I've upgraded that things run slower. It's noticeable. It's absolutely noticeable. Like, why is this taking longer? Why is this happening? And then to find out that it was artificially throttled at the CPU GPU level is, I don't know how to think. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with why Apple's doing this. They want my device to last longer, but there's something devious about slowing down your device on a family of devices that's designed to sell every year. Like, if they were going to slow down your computer so it lasts 10 years, that's one thing. But Apple really, really, really wants you to buy the new product. And so the idea that they would slow down their marquee product and then say, this is our newest, fastest iPhone, come and buy this, it's faster. Well, it's, I wonder if those metrics, Ben, have to do with, like, if it's faster because we've made your old one slower on purpose.
Well, I really doubt it, because in getting into the article, it does say that the real reason behind this, and just for a technical point of view, well, a rudimentary technical point of view, they did this because I guess they were experiencing problems with newer iOS running on older hardware, and essentially utilizing more of the capacity that you were just talking about. That newer iterations of hardware are marginally better than the old ones. Well, that takes more battery power. And when your battery is old, when it can't run a full cycle like it used to, a charge doesn't last as long. Instead of, doing any number of probably more appropriate things, they slowed down the processor so it wouldn't draw as much power. This was a
No.
battery issue more than it was
Yeah.
a software issue.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both. And by the way,
Oh, totally both, but yeah.
what total BS that is. What a total BS response that was from Apple. First of all, Apple products, like all phone products, have always had problems with battery life. They use lithium batteries. Look, the reason your battery life is better in your iPhone Plus is because it's got a bigger battery. Wow, what better battery life? Yeah, it's a bigger battery. That's the same. I expect this from Apple. Apple is turning into a fashion company, and this is the same tactic that candy makers use with candy, right? Hey, half the calories. Yeah, it's half the candy.
Yeah.
So only 100 calories. Yeah, it's the size of a thimble. That's why
So
it's only 100 calories.
So
But
here's why a lot of people were upset about Apple, is because they could have done this in a different way. And one of those ways
yeah,
was they could have alerted you that your hardware was getting worn out. Other companies do this. There are tests that you can run on, let's
Exactly.
say, RAM in your computer to know when a memory stick
But
is going bad.
but it's a battery. Apple has offered battery replacement since the beginning of the iPhone.
And they
You
still
know,
do.
if your battery dies, you get a new battery, or you get look. I have an old laptop that's 7 years old from HP. I have to plug it in the. I don't use it. It's a spare, right? But if I want
Mhm.
to use it, I got to plug it in the wall because the battery died. If I want a new battery, I can buy a new battery. Okay, true, true. With an iPhone, a lot of people have made this out. I can't just go and buy a new battery. I got to bring it into Apple. But you know what? I paid for this technology. They bragged about how fast the processor was. They bragged about this. Let me give you an example why this is so uh, detrimental to Apple's bottom line. Guess what came out this week? Civilization 6 came out for iOS this week on iPad. Did you see this?
No.
Yeah, the full game. Now, if you've ever played Civilization 6, it's a pretty graphically intensive game. And so what Apple usually does, they've been pretty good about this, and I've applauded them. They've kept their compatibility between generations pretty consistent, would you say?
Right.
Much more so than anything else. But here's the thing. This is a graphically intensive game. It needs certain processors because I assume the developers say, okay, these are the specs I'm going to develop for this. If you look up the specs for Civilization 6 on iOS, it's pretty hefty. You need a pretty powerful iPad to run it. So what happens if you have that iPad that you purchased because Apple in their little show talked about how great the GPU was, what version of A11 processor it was, how many gigaflops, and Apple decides they're going to throttle that. What's going to happen when you have an iPad that plays software today that they decide they're going to limit that they're going to throttle that software in an update. Therefore, what type of compatibility issues could happen?
Oh,
I have
it
problems
happens all
playing
the time.
podcasts
Yeah.
now. I have problems playing a podcast,
It
you know?
happens all the time,
Yeah.
and that's why people were like, but it was always rumor. It was rumor, 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 and people were like, yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
experienced that too. This is what you were talking about at the very beginning. This was having your paranoia confirmed,
Exactly.
and
It's like
yeah,
now I'm wondering what else like is there a monster under my bed? It's like but it's I understand the idea that Apple's saying this, but I don't buy it
well,
because what it does it breaks the agreement that you bought there's excuse me,
an
an
expectation of the hardware
expectation
that you purchased that
of
you
there's an
paid money.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
an expectation of what's the word I'm looking for? Performance. And it's not like a car. If you buy a car, if you buy a six-cylinder car after 20 years, yeah, that thing's going to be puttering. This isn't like this. This is different. And by
It,
the way, if your
it's
car starts
it's
puttering, you replace it. You replace a part.
it's kind of like that but in this case, if you own your car in terms of phone years, if you own your car for 20 years and you take it into the only shop that's approved to tell you what's wrong with it, and you go, oh hey, my car, the gas tank is really really crappy, and they go, oh well, you can upgrade to a new one, and they never tell you about just replacing the battery. And folks, that was part of the story, was that they ran tests. They ran benchmarking software before and after a battery change. If you want the original performance of your phone, and Apple didn't tell you this, just replace the battery. It costs about $80. You can do it. You send it in, takes a couple days, or you can do it yourself if you're handy. And yeah, just a new battery, and it's back to its old ways. They never gave people that option. That was
No,
the
they didn't.
part,
They didn't even tell people this was happening.
right?
This is. I got to tell you something. If you were to buy a new iPhone 7, which is last year's model,
Hmm?
if you were to buy an iPhone 7 and the specs, you go onto the website and it says it has this, you're not going to get those specs at performance because Apple has artificially throttled them.
Well,
You know what's
you would if it was a new phone, but like
No,
I
if it
bought
was
my
refurbished, if it was a refurb.
well, no, even new phones, because new phones with the new batteries. But like I have an iPhone 7 Plus sitting here. I know that my year-old phone is going to perform worse than a current fresh bought Apple iPhone 7 just because they slowed it down. I know this.
But do you know what's funny? You don't expect performance as good as an iPhone 8, but you don't expect performance to be degraded when it doesn't have to be. And you know what's really funny? No one's ever made this point, so let me make it. You see this happen all the time in Windows PCs. You have people overclocking.
Hmm.
You have people overclocking, and the companies will say, we're going to give you this product. It can be overclocked, but we don't recommend it. But if you want to do it, here's how you do it. Full transparency. If you overclock, it's going to make your CPU run hotter. You're going to need more ventilation. They tell you. And Apple's MO has always been let us do it for you.
Hmm.
And they've been facing charges of infantilization. And let's be honest, the average iOS user is probably not as sophisticated. I don't mean that in any bad way because I'm an iOS person, but we're not as sophisticated as the person who geek bench tests everything. I need this. They just want to get on and use Twitter, Instagram. They want to do stuff. They want to make stuff happen. They want to use Twitter. But it's noticeable,
Right.
and it didn't need to happen the way it happened. Again, I assume they're being sued at the wazoo, and so I assume that there
There's
there might
yeah.
be a quote unquote fix to this. But
Well, and that's, let's wrap this up here by saying, the fix that I think and you think, the fix I think that needs to happen is simply transparency. Is that they need to say your
yeah,
battery is, can only hold 60% of the charge it did when it was new. If you'd like to keep performing at original levels, replace the battery, or if you'd like to use this new feature where we throttle the processor but you get to keep everything, then you can do that as well. Transparency would have made this a non-issue. Instead, for years and years, people assumed, and now they're in hot water.
they did something very similar to the MacBook Pro last year. You remember where they hid the battery indicator? Like, this is not a new thing for Apple with batteries. Like, there is a conscious decision going on with Apple to remove battery indicators and remove that option from you. And I'm not comfortable with how they're doing it. And Apple's a very good company, and I applaud them for all the good stuff they've done, but they screwed up. And I hope the fix isn't, you know, isn't going to create more havoc than it was. I don't usually agree with the Apple bashers. I totally agree with this one. My iOS on my iPod Touch runs slower than it did before the update. It's noticeably slower, and not because of software. Well, I guess because of software,
Right.
you know. But I don't know.
The the
So I think that
biggest detriment, and just real quick, I mean, the biggest detriment that this can have is that you are now potentially, and I don't know about you, but I would never advocate this to not update to the latest version because usually there's security updates and it keeps you safe. But this could lead to a
Apple's had a
situation.
tough year for updates, Ben.
Yeah,
They've had a tough year.
this could lead to a situation where people actively go out of their way to not update their cell phones, and that's a problem.
Well, Apple's been pushing updates for the most bizarre reasons, and it's pretty clear. And I've said this before, and let me be the final thing I say about this.
Sure, go for it.
The quality control at Apple is not what it used to be. It's pretty clear. I'm not going to jump and say it's because of Steve Jobs because the guy's been dead for 6 years. So, but I will say this clearly, like I see clones. I see Chinese porn clones in the App Store that never used to happen. Apple, you are the richest company in the world. There is no reason for this. Seriously, you make more money. The quality control is the worst it's ever been. This is this is pre-Jobs crap quality at Apple. They need to get their you know what together quickly because the one thing they have that no other company has is brand recognition and satisfaction that is being deteriorated with these small you want to talk about Chinese culture? Here's a good quote for your audience. Death by a thousand
Thousand
cuts.
cuts. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what's happening with Apple. Like little things are all taking away from the luster of it. Little things, and it's happening at an alarming rate. Maybe they need to focus less on diversity of people and more on diversity of product quality because it's bad. It's bad and it's noticeable. And the one thing in the world you don't want to have happen with Apple is let all those nasty nerds be right about their paranoia because that's what's happening.
So, and you're right. I will leave that as the last thing we say about Apple, and I will now give you a chance to, hey, decide where you want to end
Okay.
end the show because, and I'll give you two choices. One, Star Wars, because I'll
Ah,
be honest, I have seen uh,
you seen it?
neither or none of the new, Rogue One or any of the others. I have not seen any of them, so I will not be an informed conversationalist. Or we can talk about Walmart. So
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
Wow, Walmart or Star Wars? If I have to choose, let's go Star Wars because it's good for
Okay.
your SEO.
All right.
So I saw it, I enjoyed it. I've spoken about it. I did a podcast about it. You can see it at sorry, you can hear it at popzara.com if you
I
like.
heard a lot of
Hate mail.
people. I heard a lot of people were a bit gripey
Well,
about it.
that's the internet. Everybody's gripey about everything. So, like, hell, AT&T gives people $1,000 for Christmas. People are griping about that. So screw that. But I'll say this: the interesting. Let's talk about tech with Star Wars, okay? Because I think that's the focus here.
Sure.
So whether you like the movie or not is irrelevant at this point. It's making a lot of money. Disney doesn't care. Here's the problem, though. There's some pretty good evidence, Ben, that Disney has been manipulating things like they've been manipulating things like the Rotten Tomato score. We saw this happen with Justice League, where Justice League scores were not counted toward the tomato meter until the movie launched. So Rotten Tomatoes has become de facto a manipulative tool because, truth be told, most people don't read Rotten Tomatoes. They see the tomato score elsewhere. They see it on Yelp, they see it on their phone, they see it on Fandango, and they just say, "Hey, look at that." So Disney, of course, being the biggest company in the world, now even bigger, they bought Fox. They know this. And so what they'll do is they'll take certain reviewers from certain websites, they'll fly them out to England, they'll pamper them up, and they'll cherry pick them for reasons. For example, there's one particular reviewer, her name is Jen Yamato. She's a good writer, but they picked her because she's sympathetic to Asian representation. One of the new characters in the movie is a character named Rose. Horrible character, by the way, pointless. That's just my opinion. But anyway, she cheers when Rose is on because box office in China. Getting off the point, but so the movie gets huge amounts of scores on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 93% at one point, but then the day the movie came out, very interestingly, the user reviews from the actual people were unprecedentedly low. There's never been a disparity like this with a major blockbuster,
Hmm.
and with Star Wars, it's usually a sure thing. And the negative reviews would come out to the point where they say, and then it's alarming. It's actually lower than the prequels. That's interesting, isn't it?
the
I
the
mean,
the prequels and Reddit being Reddit and the internet being the internet. The prequels are getting
well,
a little resurgence, but yeah,
well, of
those were
course. I
pretty
mean,
panned.
you know,
Those are pretty
Mao,
panned.
Mao and Stalin, they weren't so bad. The trains ran on time. But anyway, long story short, there's been a lot of controversy over the way the reviews have been done. And I've said this on the show before. Yeah, it's manipulated. Of course it is. But the problem is that if I see Star Wars: The Last Jedi gets a 90%, is that going to make me want to see it any more than I already do? Maybe not on a movie like Star Wars. Maybe on a movie like Blade Runner, sure, that needs a little bit of the help. Maybe, but if I don't see a negative review for Justice League, is it going to make me want to see it any more or less? I don't think so. And I think this is Disney struggling to find a way to make everyone happy with this new generation of Star Wars. You know, Final thought about this to as a little bit of evidence. You saw what happened with Thor Ragnarok, where Disney would banish reviewers who talked disparagingly about the company, right? And there was backlash for this. Disney has a brand to protect. They have a brand to protect. So they're going to pollinate, they're going to seed, which if you think about Rotten Tomatoes is a very good metaphor. They're going to seed these reviewers to guarantee good reviews. You also saw this happen last year with Ghostbusters. Didn't help that movie. And I will say this. I enjoyed Star Wars: The Last Jedi. It's not my favorite Star Wars. I may not ever see it again. But don't let that stop you from seeing it and making up your own mind. It's not for everybody. And I think there's a good argument to be made both ways over some of the choices. But I think we can all agree that Ghostbusters was terrible. And so, again, not the things we like, Ben, but the things we all can agree that are stinky. And Ghostbusters 2016 was pretty stinky.
All
And
right.
Star Wars is a lot better than that. So,
All right. So, and bringing this around full circle, I definitely don't want to dwell too long on, hey, what we all hate, but rather what we all enjoy. And Nathan, I knew that this would happen. Still lots of topics and still no time. So,
it's never enough.
it's never enough. So, with that being said, Nathan, I'll give you just 1 second to talk about Popzara and hey, some things that you're excited about that people can find there.
Being distracted by this amazing dance music. But I was going to say, if you want to dance your way over to a good website, please check out popzara.com. It's been totally revamped. It looks really good. It's getting better all the time. There's going to be a lot of new awesome content. There's podcasts. There's interplay between people who've been on this Computer America show and Popzara. It's a good relationship. It's kind of like Britain and America.
Right.
It's really tight. So.
Except
And
one
by the way,
never owned
happy
the other.
holidays to everybody too.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Saturnalias, everyone out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, there you go. That's Nathan Evans. He will be joining us. Let's see if my calendar is about right. You should be on sometime in late January where, hey, we have CES to talk about. So, and of course, in between that, we have lots to discuss as well. So,
Yes.
everyone, Nathan Evans, Popzara magazine, check it out in the show notes. So, and one last time, Computer America taking an extended vacation all next week. Best of Computer America's reruns. Check that out, and we'll be back Tuesday with Corey Gallagher from Popzara. Everyone, we'll be
Yay.
back. Hey, stay tuned.
Bye-bye.